In this section, we're going to take a quick look at a couple of famous Greek philosophies of the Hellenistic period. They're going to carry over and have a lot of influence into the Middle Ages as well as to the early modern era and on to today. One of them will be for us to take a look at the idea of Stoicism. It was a philosophy that was organized in Athens under a man named Zeno, who's depicted here on a coin. And the idea of Zeno, this Stoicism, will be a very powerful influence, especially amongst the political classes of the Roman Empire and on. And we'll be talking about that in units to come. We'll also have a conversation about the ideas of Epicurus. Epicurus also was an Athenian philosopher of this Hellenistic age. His philosophy later on is going to be termed Epicureanism, in honor of his name and then making it into a philosophy. And he's going to provide a different kind of philosophy of life, one that in many ways is has some aspects of being opposite of what Zeno had proposed with his Stoicism. And we'll take a look also at a third philosophy that will be in the Greek Golden Age called skepticism. But let's take a quick look here at the three different philosophies. And these, once again, are going to be very quick overviews of some of the ideas. Now, Stoicism, under Zeno, had created this idea that the way in which someone should live their life is that they should find a way to find happiness in virtue, happiness or success in doing the right thing, of providing what was necessary, of doing your duty and follow through on your word and provide yourself as a figure of service to your family, to your polis, to your larger community. So it has many ideas that later on will be very attractive to politicians, especially if we look at some of the ideas here, like the idea of accepting your duty and also of engagement, that you should go into your community and you should try to make it better. You should try to work with your family members. In other words, it is sort of a duty-bound, action-driven kind of idea, and that also it was a believing that by doing that, by engaging in the world and doing what's necessary, you are engaging in the divine will. The idea then that you are a servant of something greater and grander. And it lends itself to many politicians later on, and we'll talk specifically in the context of Rome. There is a very powerful idea here that one must accept their duty, do what they can, wrestle with ideas, struggle to make the lives of yourselves and your family and your society better, and that your engagement is something that the divine will, whatever kind of religious entity you want to think about there, that it has the support of this larger picture, and that essentially it is your duty to find happiness in making that virtue happen and making those things happen. In terms of Epicurus, there are some things that are opposite here. Epicurus is looking for the idea of finding happiness, which was something that was coming out of Stoicism as well, but finding it or looking for it in a different way. While the follower of Zeno would want to go out there and engage the community and do what they can, and sometimes come under great stress and great criticism and great strife, Epicurus would look at that and say, no, avoid those kind of things. Why would you go and seek out things that give you stress or undermine your basic health? Why would you do that when the real idea of life is to pursue a pleasurable life? Now, he does not mean that you drink yourself into a stupor or in other ways destroy your physical or mental health in pursuit of some kind of short-term pleasure. His idea of pleasure is very long-term, and it's built on the idea that you're going to get to that place of goodness, of harmony, of self-respect, and of love from the kind of ideas where you're going to make sure you serve yourself first. You're going to look for pleasure in life where you can find it. And one way to do that is to simply avoid pain, avoid stress, avoid putting yourself in situations where you're going to have a possibility for hurt of some kind, emotional or physical. While the Stoic, the Zeno-like philosopher would have you go out there into society and culture and take on the big issues of the day, Epicurus would say, you know what, to avoid that, why don't you and some friends get together, withdraw a little bit from society, and seek your own sort of harmony and pleasure in the world, all right? That you should look for the things that make you happy, and that they should be things that are meaningful to you. Now, for example, you'll find that in some modern contexts, you'll see that people who are Epicureans or Epicureanists are referred to as people who really like to have excellent food, well-made food with high-quality ingredients that are very enjoyable and pleasurable to them. So this idea of Epicurean in our modern world has been converted down to sort of like, the best of food and beverages as an idea of providing pleasure to yourself and to your friends and family. That's just one aspect of what Epicurus was talking about, but these two philosophies are existing inside the city of Athens at roughly the same time period, and there are, of course, followers who are following these ideas, as well as those, of course, the continuation of ideas from Socrates and Plato and Aristotle, the generations that came before them. In between here is another idea that also is going to become increasingly powerful, especially where it's adopted and used by many different people at different points in the coming era. It's simply called the idea of skepticism. And we still have this word in English today. It essentially means that you have doubt, that you're not quite sure that that's true, or you really want to double check that the information that's provided to you, you just don't take in and say, okay, yeah, I want proof. I want to check that out. I need to get more information to make sure that that is true. Skepticism is going to be based on the idea that, think of it this way, many of us gather knowledge of the world by our senses, what we hear, what we see, what we taste and smell. But we also know enough to say something like magicians, right? The role of a magician as an entertainer is to deceive you, that your senses cannot keep up with what they are doing, that they can pull a rabbit out of a hat or a card trick, or they can make something disappear under a piece of velvet cloth or something, right? Now we know scientifically that things just don't disappear like that, but our senses are not able to keep up. Our senses have been deceived. Skeptics would use that idea as saying, listen, you might be gathering as much knowledge as you can on this earth and taking in all the information through all your senses that you can, but you can't trust it. It's not what you think it might be. So this is the idea also that even though you're using all of your senses to come to conclusions, a skeptic would say, I'm not quite sure that you got there. You can't do that. You can't prove what you can't prove. So the idea here is that you cannot accept everything that the human senses accept from their environment, and you can't use that to prove anything in the world. Take a look at the previous work on Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, and then see these as philosophies that continue that legacy. All of them will come back and be useful in many places in the Middle Ages, as parts of them will be resurrected and used by other philosophers and politicians and other groups in the future. Make sure you take a look at what your textbook is doing and your online reading to bring these ideas together. And of course, you've got to take a look at all those sample questions.